Chapter 19: Bourbon Barons, Tobacco Tycoons, and King Coal, the Economy, 1865 to 1995. Over the years, over the years, Kentucky has been known for producing coal, tobacco, bourbon, and horses. But is this an accurate picture of its present-day economy? With farming, in the early days, most people in Kentucky made their living on farms. Almost everyone planted corn, since it provided food for both people and animals. Additionally, it grew tall, which kept the ears of corn beyond the reach of small animals that may and try to eat it. Years before the Civil War, Kentucky planted many different crops and became one of the richest farming states. In 1840, Kentucky ranked first in the United States in the production of wheat and hemp. Kentucky ranked second in growing tobacco and corn, and fourth in producing rye. Kentucky had a very healthy and varied farming economy. Hemp served as the main cash crop for Kentucky before the Civil War. People would make clothing out of hemp. They also made hemp bags to ship cotton and hemp rope for use on sailing ships. Kentucky grew more than half the hemp in the United States. After the Civil War, people used metal wire for cotton bales, and steamboats would replace sailing ships. By the end of the century, Kentucky produced all hemp in the country. Eventually, hemp would become a dying crop. By the 20th century, it disappeared from Kentucky farms. Another variation of it would appear later in the form of marijuana plants. And I do just a link, Allison Grimes and trying to legalize medical marijuana. So if you do want to write this site down, it's an article from last November 16th, I believe. I believe the article came out November 16th, 2017. As the demand for hemp decreased, tobacco prices rose, and Kentucky farmers decided to switch crops. Tobacco became the main cash crop on Kentucky farms. From 1865 to 1929, Kentucky grew more tobacco than any other state. Kentucky ranked second to North Carolina in tobacco production. I do remember my freshman year in college, my uncle had a tobacco farm, and I didn't do any cutting or stripping of the tobacco. I loaded it up. I helped to load it on a wagon, and this was back in the late 80s, and so he paid $5 an hour, and it was going to be an 8-hour work day. So I calculated 2 days, 16 hours, $80. So for an 18-year-old, I thought that'd be some good, quick, easy money, and some gas money also. And the first day I worked a half a day. I worked from 8 to 12. And then my aunt and some other cousins who were younger and some other family members, they decided to take a little half a day trip. So I went with them that afternoon, and the next day I returned and did the 8-hour work day, and my uncle paid me by check, and it was for $60. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me, it was for $40. And I said, I looked at it and I looked at him and I said, I was expecting at least $20 more because I worked a half a day the other day. And he looked at me and said, I don't pay for half days, I pay for full days. So I quickly learned a lesson in working to work full days as far as to get paid. I guess the family members are going to be paying you. So just a lesson learned for me. Marmaduke B. Morton, a newspaper reporter. He's a newspaper reporter, and in 1938 he wrote the book Kentuckians Are Different. In his book, he described working on a tobacco farm in western Kentucky in the 19th century. Small plants were hoed by hand. When they grew larger, they were warmed by hand. If a boy was careless and left a big worm, he may be required to bite off the worm's head. Late summer, early fall, the tobacco was cut and hung in the barn where it was air cured or fire cured. When it was dried out, it would be stripped. So if you do have family members who have a tobacco farm, or if you've cut or stripped tobacco, you'll know just a little bit more than I would about this. My only experience was just that one summer in the tobacco fields. The 19th century, people used tobacco mostly for cigars and chewing tobacco. 20th century, machine-made cigarettes became more common. Farmers also used tobacco to pay their taxes. As the demand for tobacco grew, so did the supply. Farmers would plant more tobacco than buyers needed. Again, that's supply and demand. And if you've taken an economics class, I'm sure the instructor went heavily over supply and demand. Tobacco prices would fall, then rise, and then fall again. When farmers grew more than one crop, a change in price did not matter, as the sale of other crops evened out the difference. However, with a one-crop economy, farmers had either good or bad years, depending on the price of tobacco. The 21st century, tobacco's future had become more uncertain, and fewer people were growing it. It plays a smaller role in Kentucky's economy. The horse industry. Before the Civil War, visitors commented that Kentucky had the best horses in the United States. Beautiful farms with white fences and horse barns soon covered the central bluegrass area. Great horses, great jockeys, great races, such as the Kentucky Derby, was added to Kentucky's image. As each year we always see all the Derby hats. I watch every now and then from my TV and on the news. Sometimes I may have some friends on Facebook who may post some pictures of some celebrities that they got while walking by, if they were so lucky. Over a 10-year period ending in the 1990s, Kentucky-bred horses won 1/3 of all major horse races. Kentucky also leads the country in the number of thoroughbred horses that are born. I've not been to the Derby. Looks way too crowded for me. I've not placed a bet either. I know I could always do it online, but I've not done any online betting. So what are Kentucky's non-horse farms like today? 2006, Kentucky crops sold for approximately $1.82 billion, with tobacco only bringing in one-fifth of that. Producing more income now are hay, corn, and soybeans. Overall, Kentucky ranked 21st in terms of the value of its crops. It appears that farming is not as important in Kentucky as it once was. In 2006, Kentucky had more than 84,000 farms, tied for fourth highest in the country. Average farm size was 163 acres. Early business in King Coal. Ads for Kentucky Bourbon appeared as early as 1821, and soon it would become nationally known for this product. Clay County became a major salt producer, shipping barrels of salt down the Kentucky River. Owensboro built one of the largest wagon-making areas in the South. Louisville had the biggest plow factory in the world. Railroads and highways would become significant influences for businessmen deciding where to locate. In eastern Kentucky, home of an iron industry before the Civil War, Kentucky was the third leading producer of iron in the country. The iron industry would be short-lived, and the timber industry would boom. The first major coal fields in Kentucky surfaced in the western part of the state, where there were good waterways, better roads, and railroads. More coal came from western Kentucky coal fields than from eastern Kentucky until 1914 and the start of World War I. As railroads inched into the eastern mountain, coal started to boom. People came to work the mines, and this caused an increase in population. Harlan County would triple in size from 10,000 to 31,000 in 10 years. The 1920s was a dangerous time for coal miners. More than 1,600 people died in Kentucky coal mines due to cave-ins or explosions. In 1970, an explosion in a Leslie County mine killed 38 miners, and in 1990, 10 miners died in a western Kentucky blast. Coal has gone through periods of boom and bust. The last boom occurred when overseas oil production halted for a time and the demand for coal increased. As time went on, the coal industry began to use machines to dig the coal, which meant fewer jobs. At one time, more than 60,000 people worked the mines. 2005, there's approximately 17,000 people who worked the mines. After World War II, people began to mine coal differently. Instead of digging underground, large machines were used to remove an entire hillside, a method known as strip mining, resulting in large scars on the mountains. Kentucky led the nation in coal production until 1983, and Kentucky ranks third among states in coal mining. The chief coal counties in 2004 were Pike, Perry, and Knott counties. Today, Kentucky is more of a manufacturing state that depends on factory products for its wealth. By the 1990s, manufacturing brought in more than 3.5 times as much money to Kentucky as did farming and mining combined. This change in economy would be slow in the beginning. Ashland oil became a major Kentucky industry by the mid-20th century. 1950s, General Electric built a factory in Louisville. GE became the biggest producer of home appliances in the world. IBM built a large factory in Lexington. Harlan Sanders he grew up in Indiana. His father died when he was 6 years old. His stepfather would throw him out of the house. They just did not get along too well, as sometimes step-parents and step-children sometimes may not get along too well. Harlan quit school after the 6th grade. He moved to Corbin, Kentucky when he was 40 years old. He ran a gas station and it burned after a few years, and he rebuilt it and added a motel and a restaurant. And this is where Kentucky Fried Chicken was born. He was made a Kentucky colonel by the governor. Colonel Sanders decided to sell his success to others. For a franchising fee, he would let others use his methods and his name. He was 66 years old when he started his success. He sold rights to produce his chicken to 600 establishments across the United States. After 8 years, Sanders sold his business for $2 million, plus a sizable annual salary for himself. 20 years later, KFC was sold again for $840 million. And Colonel Sanders died in 1980 at the age of 90. Producing energy. In addition to Louisville Gas and Electric, power plants operated near land between the lakes. In the Paducah area, an atomic plant produces energy. Because of its production of electricity, Kentucky had the lowest electricity cost in the country in 2003. Global Kentucky. People who work in Kentucky need to know what's happening overseas. So let's suppose oil prices in the Middle East go down, causing gasoline prices to fall in the United States. And the question is, how does that matter to Kentucky's economy? Lower oil prices might mean less demand for coal, which means fewer jobs and less money for Kentucky miners. If oil prices go down, it also means less money for oil-producing countries, such as Saudi Arabia. And does this influence Kentucky? Yes, it does, as Saudi Arabians often buy Kentucky racehorses. 25% of all these horses are sold overseas. If oil producers have less money to spend, they will not bid as high or may not buy at all. Lower demand means lower prices to the owners. Lower oil prices also mean lower prices at the gas station. This could help another group important to Kentucky's economy, which is tourists. If it costs less, to travel, more tourists might come to Kentucky and spend their money. Additionally, if gas prices fall, people may buy more vehicles that use more gasoline, and Kentucky makes some of those vehicles. If demand for vehicles go up as gas prices go down, then more vehicles would be made and Kentucky workers would earn more money. Lower prices at the gas station may also mean that station owners make smaller profits. I remember speaking to a gas station owner, and I believe he said on gas, this was about 20 years ago, he made about a half a cent on each gallon that he sold. Lower gas prices would have an impact on airplanes. The UPS hub in Louisville could ship things more cheaply, and if other prices stayed the same, UPS would make more money. Lower gas prices may also mean that it costs less to ship goods from one place to another by truck. This also could mean savings for the fast food businesses in Kentucky, which would earn more and have more to spend themselves. And so this concludes chapter 19. So make sure that you do read chapter 19. We are only going to cover chapter 19 for this week. I know that's a little bit different than what I have in the syllabus, but just with the holidays, I just wanted to cover chapter 19. You also have a video to watch about the bourbon boom in Kentucky, and just a discussion assignment. I believe you will find that interesting. It was done by a Louisville reporter, and so you'll find that, again, I believe you'll find that interesting. And then you also have a primary source assignment, and you'll just need to read a document and just answer a few questions for me. So if you do have questions on this chapter or about the video itself or the other assignment, just please let me know.